Hey leaders, Tarun Stevenson here for Lead, Communicate, Grow, and in this episode we're going to look at the 5 ways that you can operate with courage under fire. You know those situations when it feels like everyone's out to get you, or you've got people criticizing your leadership. How do you operate with integrity? How do you operate with a calm, and how do you lead your teams well through those challenging times and have them come out the other end with you and not against you? Why don't we get into it? All right, here we go. These are 5 tips that you can lead with courage under fire. If you're feeling under fire from your team, maybe from your superiors, from your situation where you're being criticized for the way that you're operating, or you've got people that are being oppositional and objectionable towards your leadership, then I want to give you some tips on how you can do this well and come out the other side with some class. And before I do this, make sure you subscribe to whatever channel you're tuning in on so that you get every episode. We put them out every week, and I hope this really helps you. So the first one is this: I think you need to understand what you stand for. So sometimes you'll have to make decisions as a leader that will be criticized. Sometimes you'll have to make decisions that not everyone agrees with, and you've got to be able to articulate what you stand for. You've got to know when what you're fighting for matters and when it's not really important. If it's a core value, if it's something that is integral to your leadership and who you are as a leader, you need to be willing to say, you know what, I'm not willing to back down on this. I'm not willing to, because this is a core value. Now, this may play out a couple of different ways, and there's ways to handle this effectively. You can have conversations to help people understand your value system. If you've set culture, if you're in a position where you get to set culture, then you may draw people back to culture and say, okay, well, you know what? I understand you don't agree with me, but this is our culture and this is how we operate. So if it's a core value and you understand that, then you've got to be prepared to fight for it. But you may find yourself in a situation where you don't set culture, but you are perhaps having to operate within a culture that is in contradiction to your own value system. And you have to make a decision whether you are prepared to compromise on your values over this. You know, I've been in leadership situations in which I found that there was a clash between my own personal value system and what was valued on the leadership team. And I had to make a decision whether I wanted to stay in that organization or whether it would be detrimental to what I felt was most valuable to my leadership. And so you've got to make those decisions, and you'll only make those decisions if you know what you stand for, what you're not prepared to compromise on, and what you're not prepared to negotiate on. Okay? Some things can be let go, some things can be negotiated, but you've got to know what that is first. The second thing is you've got to evaluate the criticism and ask yourself the question, is it fair? Sometimes we find ourselves at odds with people in our leadership that they may be making assessments of our leadership or making assessments of our decision making that is reasonable and fair. And if we're not in the habit of self-reflection, if we're not in the habit of asking ourselves, well, maybe it doesn't feel good what they said, maybe I don't like what they said, but are they saying something that's true? And if they are saying something that's true, then it is incumbent on you as the leader to be willing to reevaluate your position. Because not all criticism is invalid. Not all criticism is bad. Some criticism is very helpful to help you grow as a leader. And you'll never grow out of that criticism if you always think everybody else is to blame. So make sure you take the time to self-evaluate the criticism and see if it has some valid points. Further to that, the third thing is I would seek counsel. So if you feel that you're being criticized for decisions that you're making or the direction that you're taking, make sure you have people in your world that can be honest with you about those decisions. You should have, if you're in a senior level position, you would have some kind of board or an executive team that you can bounce off and say, okay, this is what's being said, what do you think? And get people's feedback. If maybe you're not in those kind of executive positions, but you should have a team or a group of confidence, people that you trust, people that understand you, people that know your world, that can speak honestly to you about what you're facing. And they may say, hey, you know what you're being criticized for is valid and you need to do something about it. Or they might say, no, that's not valid and you need to stick to your guns. But you won't know that if you don't have a team of people that you trust and can call you on that stuff. The fourth thing is this, is I guess it really ties to the first three, is you've got to pick your battles. Not every battle is worth fighting. You may find that you have a value that's really integral to you, but it is over an issue that is so small that in fighting that battle you may lose the relationship. I like to say this, you've got to pick which hill you want to die on, because if you fight every battle that comes along, you may find you're dying over causes that aren't worth fighting for. And so pick your battles. Some battles you're better off just letting it go and circling back and dealing with it at a later time, rather than digging in and confronting something that maybe has such a small impact on the whole scheme of things that it's not even worth fighting over. Okay? You know, I had a mentor once that used to say, never fight over preferences. Okay, that's I think good advice. There is a difference between values and preferences. You know, preferences is the color of the paint on the walls. If you want one color and somebody else wants a different color and they're feeling very strongly about that color, it's not worth having an argument over. All right, doesn't mean you let them bully you, but at the same time you can have a conversation and say, okay, well, you know, you like that color. Tell me why you like that color. Am I really committed to having my color? If you're not, then be willing to compromise, because it might not be a battle worth fighting. All right, and the last one is this: play the long game. If you're in leadership for the long haul, if you're looking to steer an organization or a team for the long term, and you've got visions and you've got goals of where you want to go, then you've got to be prepared to be patient in the way you implement change. Don't try and make all the changes at once. Play the long game. Sometimes you've got to be prepared to lose the short-term battles for the sake of the long-term outcomes. And if you play the long game, I kind of liken my leadership to playing a game of chess. When you're playing a game of chess, you have to look 3 moves ahead of your opponent, and you have to be willing to sometimes sacrifice one particular piece on the board for 3 moves ahead, because you see what's coming down the line. And if you get stuck on fighting over the little stuff, you won't be thinking ahead. You won't be playing the long game. You'll be playing a game of checkers. And checkers is fast, but checkers, there's a lot of attrition. Everybody loses their pieces in the end. And so you don't want to do leadership like checkers. You want to do leadership like chess. And if you don't play chess, well, that's okay. The analogy still works. Just be patient with your leadership, okay? So that's 5 ways that I think that you can lead with courage under fire. When you're being criticized, when you've got people that are perhaps working against you in your leadership and your decision making, remember to know what you stand for, figure out what's worth fighting for and what's not worth fighting for, evaluate the criticism, figure out whether what is being said is true and whether it's something you need to adjust. Seek wise counsel. Make sure you've got a team of people around you that can advise you and help you to read the situation appropriately. Pick your battles. Not every battle is worth fighting. Sometimes you lose one battle for the future. And the last one is play the long game. Be patient in your leadership. Don't try and change everything at once. Don't get so adamant about changing everything at once that you can't just step it out over the long time. And you will find that you will come out of these confrontations and out of these critical junctures with integrity. You will have people respecting you. You will have people wanting to follow you, rather than if you were just boorish and bulldoze your way through your team. You'll end up losing people in the end, and you'll end up coming out. You might have won your battle, but you'll lose your team along the way. So I hope that really helped you. Lead with courage under fire. If you liked it, give us a comment below. Tell us what you liked. Make sure you share it with somebody that you think will benefit from this content. And think about leaving a review if you're listening on our podcast, or if you're tuning in on Facebook or YouTube. Just help us to get that algorithm working in the recommendation field, so that more people can get to know us, and that would be really very much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Tarun Stevenson.